Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Matt Rhule, the Nebraska Cornhuskers, working their way through fall camp. And Dill, one of the things that we appreciate most about Matt Rhule, he's going to be transparent about this program. He's going to let the media see fall camp. He's going to put together those showcases that we saw over the weekend. And for us, wanted to talk some Nebraska football. It gives us a lot to talk about. You're starting to get a feel for who's really stepping up during fall camp, who are going to be the difference makers for this Nebraska program. And where I'd start is you love what you're hearing out of fall camp, specifically on the offensive side of the football. Not only Dylan Raiola kind of asserting himself as that quarterback one, but some young pass catchers stepping up as well. Want to get into the guys that are kind of putting a stamp on what they're going to mean to this Nebraska program. Really fired up to get into it. Before we do, and as always, one for the Nebraska fans, look, we know dang well you guys are reading the fall camp notes as well. Would love to hear the names that are catching your eyes in terms of standing out, putting stamps on what they're going to mean to this program. We'll chop it up in the comment section. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Just a massive shout out to the Nebraska fans all off season long, whether we're talking transfer portal, high school recruiting 2024, the amount of support, the Go Big Reds you guys throw in the comment section, that stuff means the world to the boys. It's no secret. We love talking this program, but we can't thank you guys enough for all the support. And Dill, without further ado, let's get into this one. And let's start with Dylan Rola. And I feel like you can't really bury the lead. And I get it. A lot of the national media, a lot of the Nebraska beat are talking about this storyline. There are two things that are standing out. And I think the first thing is you go back over the last 2 weeks and kind of us previewing fall camp for Nebraska. What did we say? Yeah, we know Dylan Rola is going to make those flashy throws. We wanted to see him take command of the offense. Down in, down out, show command, know what he's doing. That's what you're seeing. You're kind of hearing that Dylan Rola is separating himself within that quarterback room. I think that's massive for two different reasons. One, you talk about confidence. What's kind of that single factor that keeps a lot of freshman quarterbacks off the field? It's probably confidence level at the college level. We kind of knew Dylan Rola had that confidence, but to see him put it together during fall camp, that's massive for this kid's confidence. I think secondly, you look at Dylan Rola as he continues to what it sounds like win that quarterback one job. He's just going to get more reps with the ones. He's going to get more comfortable in this Nebraska offense. If we kind of continue to see a tightly contested quarterback battle where Dylan Rola is not really pulling away, he's probably not getting as many opportunity with this number one offense, but to see him getting those opportunities, you kind of get a feel that he's going to be ready come August 31st to run this Nebraska offense.
And that's a good point. I don't think it's ever ideal to really have quarterback battles in a sense. I think every coach you kind of hear by fall camp wants one of their guys to have won that job. I think every year Ryan Day's always said, I want somebody to emerge and be the guy. J.J. McCarthy versus Cade McNamara, I don't think that was helpful for Michigan, having that battle leak into fall camp and even into the middle of the season. So I think you're right. Very, very ideal to have Dylan Raiola just kind of solidify himself as the guy. And not only for 2024, but I think when you look at the momentum Nebraska football in general is building up on the recruiting trail with the support they're getting from their base, if you will, I think Dylan Rhule is kind of the one where all that energy is emanating from. You look when David Sanders comes on campus, Dylan Rhule is leading the charge. He is the one who's getting that fan base going, getting that energy kind of going. So I think you want him to take control of that program, be the face of it as soon as possible, because that is how I think you keep the ball rolling in that moment.
We feel a lot of momentum. Like this Nebraska program with momentum, it's just a snowball, and it's gaining traction. It comes from Dylan Raiola. You look at David Sanders. Why is he so interested in Nebraska? One, his relationship with Dylan Raiola, but I think more importantly, he's seeing this true freshman come in and kind of take over this program, especially this offense. These young kids, the talented ones, they want to be a part of this Nebraska program, kind of turning it around. And if Dylan Raiola, as a freshman quarterback, can help make that happen, again, not only going to win a lot of football games in 2024, but I think more importantly, it's really going to get the ball rolling for Matt Rhule on the recruiting trail as well. Number two storyline, and again, we've kind of said this all summer, a storyline that's flying under the radar is how much better this Nebraska team is from a pass catcher standpoint. You go back to 2023, yes, the national media reminds us plenty that the quarterback play wasn't good enough. There were so many true freshmen wide receivers that were forced to play last year because of injuries and just kind of lack of depth at that position. you look at this Nebraska offense and the weapons category heading into 2024, it's night and day difference. Now, Jamal Banks and Isaiah Nayor are going to come in and kind of be guys. What I'm most fired up about is hearing some of the young pass catchers really emerge as well. I want to start with Jakori Barney Jr., one of the most dynamic pass catchers on this Nebraska offense, really as a true freshman, but I think more importantly, brings something to this Nebraska offense that they kind of just lacked last year. Where you go back to 2023, they just didn't have a guy that could give them some easy juice, right? Could you get the ball to him on a screener and end around and let good things happen? Jakori Barney Jr. can be that guy. He's elite after the catch, has elite short area quickness in terms of making people miss. If Jakori Barney Jr. can play well as a freshman and give Nebraska that element that they kind of seem to miss in 2023, that's a massive storyline because you look at Jamal Banks, Isaiah Nayor, they're going to be good wide receivers, but they're not necessarily these dynamic after the catch options. Jakori Barney Jr. is that guy.
And I think one important thing about having some of these younger guys emerge is I think you give yourself more of a wide receiver rotation where you're not cobbling it together. I think you have guys for each role. You look, Jamal Banks, Isaiah Nayor, Malachi Coleman as he continues to develop. Those are boundary guys. They're guys who can do the things you want to do on the boundary, be vertical threats in Malachi Coleman's case, maybe even Isaiah Nayor's case. And then you have your guys who can work the slot really well, Jalen Lloyd, Jakori Barney. That, to me, I think was something they severely missed last year, was just the ability to have defined roles for each wide receiver where you could count on them to get their job done in their specific role. Last year, it just felt like a lot of cobbling. It felt like, oh, this guy's hurt, so we're throwing Jalen Lloyd into the boundary or so forth, that type of thing. I think having the depth, having the rotation you need, I think will allow guys to just play their position and do it at a far higher level because nothing felt smooth last year. And
you want your pass catcher room to be like a basketball team where you have just different guys that are doing different things. That's what it feels like more. I think you
got to get good at their things. I think that was such a big issue. The lack of timing, the lack of concise route running, all of that. I think eminently when you're just playing a different wide receiver position every week, and it felt like that's kind of what was going on at times with the injuries. I think that kind of hampered what they were doing.
100% agree with that. Now, I think the next storyline that at least I have is this offensive line. Now, I think there are two storylines coming out of the showcase and coming out of what you've heard from this Nebraska program. One, Micah Mazakua stepping up and kind of settling into this Nebraska offensive line. That's massive. I mean, obviously, there were some growing pains during spring ball where you heard that he wasn't even working with the ones at some point. He's kind of going to be a starting guard. I think that's a massive storyline. I look at the inside of this Nebraska offensive line. Justin Evans, a guy that we've just been banging the table for since 2023, and Micah Mazakua with Ben Scott at the center spot. That's a really, really good interior offensive line. Then you look at the tackle position. We kind of know what we're getting with Bryce Benhart, a guy that has just played so much football within this Nebraska program. I think what's emerged as probably the next biggest storyline for this Nebraska team in fall camp is that battle at left tackle where you have Teddy and Turner going at it. Dill, I think we both agree, and I think a lot of the Nebraska fans probably listening to this probably agree as well. We want to see Teddy win that job. This is not a shot at a guy like Turner Corcoran. We've seen him play left tackle, and he's going into, his fifth or sixth year. I mean, he's been within this program. We've seen a lot of him. He's not a great starting left tackle in the Big Ten. We've seen Teddy play some quality left tackle spots. So if you're a Nebraska fan, you want to see Teddy win that job. And then if Turner Corcoran's that sixth man that can play guard, can play tackle in a pinch, that's probably the ideal Nebraska offensive line rotation heading into the 2024 year.
Yeah, I think we talked about that being one of those questions because, again, when your offensive line is kind of so good everywhere else, that left tackle spot's so important. You need it to be solid. It's been a problem for Nebraska, it feels like, for about 3 years now where they just have gotten no consistency. I think you're right. At the end of the day, Teddy Prochazka is the one who has at times shown at least he is very physically capable if he stays healthy and is consistent, is doing the right things game in and game out. He is the guy who I think plays it at the level they'll need it played at. So that to me will be one to kind of monitor. I think at the end of the day, I really do want to see him kind of.
And the offensive line is one of those position groups that you're kind of only as strong as your weakest link, right? You can have a really good starting four, and then if you have question marks at a left tackle spot, it's hard to have a good offensive line. So I think that's the main goal for Nebraska. Hey, we feel dang good about four of our starting offensive linemen. We feel pretty dang good about the depth of this offensive line as well. can we see that left tackle position get ironed out over the next 2 to 3 weeks heading into August 31st? That's kind of what you're looking for on the Nebraska offensive line. Now, Dill, go to the defense. One of the things that I really standing out to me is the interior defensive line depth. And we talked about that being one of the bigger storylines within this Nebraska program. Look, it's not a flashy conversation to have, but we all know it's dang important, right? You have an elite duo with Ty Robinson and Nash. There's no question about that. You go back to 2023, there was, for lack of better terms, a significant drop-off when Ty and Nash were off the field, which one forced Ty and Nash to play a little bit more than you probably want your big bodies playing. I think more importantly, if you're trying to win 8-9 games in a Big Ten season, you need depth on the defensive line. Hearing guys like Riley Van Poppel, Sua Leofotu kind of putting it together going into year two, building that depth within the middle of that defensive line. Again, not flashy, but a massive storyline for Nebraska.
And Lefotu's the guy to me I'm looking at. I think they really need him to emerge and be a guy they can count on, because you kind of look, they really don't have that many other defensive tackles who look the way he looks, like physically very capable of playing any of the physicality or physical teams.
That fire hydrant look.
And you need them. You need someone, I think, to, again, be able to come in on first and second down once in a while, give Ty or Nash a break so they can be the pass rushers, because you want Ty to be healthy, fresh, ready to rock and roll when you want him to rush the passer. I think it'd be really, really helpful if they can get Lefotu in there to be able to work some of those early downs. And not like Ty Robinson's going to play a ton, but I think you want to be able to, in a pinch, use Lefotu to kind of spell Ty Robinson, especially in the way you kind of mentioned. He is the guy who physically at least looks very capable of doing
especially in that 3-3-5, where you look at why Nash and Ty are so important. I mean, they're eating up double teams. If you're going to play that 3-3-5 look, you need your interior defensive line to win at the point of attack. Look, they're not going to make a ton of plays beyond the line of scrimmage. That's the job of other players within that 3-3-5 defense, but you need those kind of bodies to make that system run.
And they really didn't have it last year. There were too many moments where they were, I mean, their defensive line was just getting moved off, and you kind of had Cameron Lenhard and Riley Van Poppel probably in Cam Leonard's part, probably being pressed into roles he really wasn't well designed to play. And then Van Poppel's part, you just need the physical maturation. So I think this year, if they're physically more ready bodies, I think it'll be huge.
We got a strong contingency of Riley Van Poppel fans, and I'm in that contingency. You look at him last year, the kid was undersized, probably shouldn't have been playing much as a freshman. Kid plays so hard and played quite good for being an undersized guy as a freshman in the Big Ten. I think him getting that body right heading into 2024, that's massive for Nebraska. The last question mark we had about Nebraska in fall camp was kind of that cornerback depth. And I think one of the biggest storylines that Tommy Hill obviously doing a little load management, not getting some practices in fall camp, which makes sense. He's played a lot of football. Jeremiah Charles, a guy that didn't get a ton of buzz. He kind of this was a Matt Rhule guy at high school, right? He was big, long, he's a track athlete, a raw football player. They weren't sure if he's going to play wide receiver or cornerback, slots in at that cornerback spot, starting to put it together. I don't think Jeremiah Charles necessarily starts for Nebraska, but if he can emerge as a guy that you look at and say, hey, we got some confidence in terms of that depth at the cornerback spot with Blyhill working his way back from injury and question marks about Ethan Nation, it's a massive storyline. And Dill, I'd argue that outside of Tommy Hill, Jeremiah Charles might have the highest ceiling within this cornerback room for this Nebraska program.
And that'll be the big part. I think you don't want to have to necessarily force certain players to play like Malcolm Herzog. I think he can play that boundary corner, but if he's better suited to play other positions, if you have one injury, I don't think you want to have to start really shuffling it around. I think you want to be able to keep guys where they're at, and that's kind of having a two deep you can trust at each position. And I think for the most part, you have it. Obviously, that corner spot was the one everyone's looking at, being like, okay, who are going to be kind of the reserve players? If Jeremiah Charles can be one of them and add to that group, I think that's another huge story in terms of getting your best five on the field, but also being able to keep your best players on the field and at the positions.
One of the things I've noticed, and we'll kind of close it on this, during this fall camp for Nebraska, there are kind of just less question marks and more depth about this team. Like Matt Rhule took over last year, didn't necessarily completely overturn the roster, but there were a lot of new faces within this roster. There were a lot of question marks about the depth going into 2023. I fast forward to 2024 and say, there aren't a ton of positions I look at and say we have massive question marks for Nebraska. I think it's a complete mass roster. Matt Rhule has done a really nice job kind of getting that competitive depth within that program. And I think that's the first step to really turning this Nebraska program around. We'll close it there. Obviously, a lot of storylines to continue to talk about within this Nebraska program. We appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas again. Would love to hear from y'all in the comment section. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.